All right. So previously I recorded a video covering the ATP Tour and the adjusted serve and return rankings for the top 50 players. Today is just going to be walking through the women's tour and kind of looking at the same types of data and just seeing how everyone stacks up and also some of the differences that are kind of evident upon doing this between both women's and men's tennis. So yeah, basically what adjusted serve and return uh, data and rankings is just level setting the playing field and taking out um, the opponent from the equation, right? Because everyone plays different schedules, different opponents, right? Sometimes you get a good draw and you play lower ranked players. Sometimes you get a more difficult draw and you're playing high ranked players. And the goal of this really is to just look at it um, like everything equal. So it just adjusts for the caliber of your opponent. And therefore you get your adjusted serve and adjusted hold and break percentages. Um, so I'll quickly walk through kind of how this all works out in the math, and then we'll dive back into the chart and kind of see where everyone stacks up and what that really means. So really, it's not that complicated. We're just looking at, I'm sure there's more detailed ways to do this, but we're just looking at the hold and break percentages against top 100 players, against top 50 players, against top 20 players, against top 10 players. And then we're calculating the kind the change, the slope, like in math, the difference between the different points. And then we're using that information to then adjust their hold percentages and their break percentages. So like normally you pull up like a graphic right before a match of say Rybakina is playing Sabalenka and they'll show like what their hold percentages are and what their break percentages are for the year. But that doesn't really give you that much information or context because you don't know who they're playing. So like if they've played 15 matches and Rybakina's played way more difficult opponents and she has a higher hold percentage, that carries a lot more weight. Again, this is just an example or a hypothetical. Um, so yeah, kind of what this means now is I'll show you a little bit across the chart and then we'll go back to the graph. So here this is just sorted for highest percentage versus top 100 players. This is your holding percentage, so like no shockers here, right? Rybakina, Sabalenka, Iga, Osaka, Andreeva, Mukova, Pegula, um, to be expected if we flip it. Arango, 50% is tough, right? Pretty much every other time you serve, you're getting broken by top 100 players. Kasatkina, Evelise, Siniakova, Jovic. But a big difference here, right, is just the percentages. In men's tennis, it's like if you're below 70, it's not great. Here it's like you're seeing like 50s and 60s. And then same thing with like the hold. Um, like 81% would be pretty low. So that just goes to show you the how important that is that Rybakina has a pretty significant lead over everybody else. And we'll kind of see that throughout. It just makes it that much more important when people are holding less and they're breaking more. Um, Same thing too with break percentage. I think the highest we see is like 31% from like Alcaraz. They're almost everybody's over 31%. So again, just shows you like the difference in why the hold rates are so much lower. Basically, the first serve is not as impactful unless you're Rybakina. Um, but yeah, so for break percentage, you got Coco, Iga, Kasatkina, Andreeva, Svitolina, Jovic. So some of these people, it's nice, right? Because they're not holding a lot. So at least they're breaking to kind of offset it. And that's why they are ranked in the top 50. Um, Same thing with like Ostapenko, who's a very interesting one that we'll see um, throughout. Quickly go through some of the other ones so you can see the change. Like Rybakina still stays at the top, Osaka, Mukova, Sabalenka, and Noskova, Iga, some of the similar names, right? But then you flip it, um, like Arango, right? She going from 50 to 44%. Now she's holding under 50% of the time against top 50 players. And like that's not obviously good, unfortunately. And then break percentage, right? Coco still stays at the top, 43%, 43%. So really no change whether she's playing somebody the top 100 or the top 50, she's still going to break it 43% of the time. Um, Same thing with like Iga up there, Ostapenko, Andreeva, and Boko jumps up a little bit. So one thing that was kind of interesting in women's tennis is there were more like positive trends, whereas the opponent got better. They actually their percentages went up, while in men's tennis, like that happened like with 1 to 2 people max, and it was not very common. Like the best players, like center, is pretty steady. It was like negative 0.39%. But here there's like some people that go way up, which is kind of unique and very different. Like for example, just look at Coco, right? She breaks at 43% of the time against top 100, 43% against top 50, 43% versus top 20, 45% versus top 10. So she actually plays better and breaks more against better competition. And she already breaks better than everybody. So basically it's just she's really good at returning, which isn't a shocker. But the level of opponent doesn't matter. In fact, if they're better, they're going to get broken more, which is kind of crazy. And then the most interesting person here, I guess I'll cover her now, is Ostapenko. Um, so we'll just look at it across the board. Her holding percentages 64, 65, 66, 74. Gets better as the competition gets better. She's played 5 matches too versus the top tens, just to clarify on the sample size. And then same thing here with breaking 39%, 40%, 42%, 47%. Like that's just ridiculous. I was pretty shocked to see like I know she beats top players and specifically Iga, but I was very shocked to see just like how high and how much better she does get. And then the data is there. I'll quickly go through the rest of it. I won't look at every specific person. Those were some of the ones that kind of stood out. Um, I don't know that anything jumps out for this. I think actually, if anything, it would just be Arango for serving. It was probably the one that stood out the most, right? 50%. So 1 out of every 2 she's getting broken. Now it's like 4 out of every 9. Um, and then 3.5 out of every 10 she's holding. And then now it's like 2 to 3 times out of 10. Like 28% is tough. Um, but her rates kind of plummet, unfortunately. Um, And then we'll just quickly look at, in case anyone's wondering, top 10, some of the players that jump up a little bit and maybe sample size plays some part. Not everyone has like 10 plus matches against top 10 players, but Vondrousova and Badosa and Kalinskaya kind of jump up a bit. But everybody else is pretty consistent, like Anna Samova, Rybakina still stays at the top, Osaka, Sabalenka kind of round out like your top 10. And then same thing with breaking. I mean, Ostapenko, as we showed, kind of jumps up, and then Coco, Sabalenka actually gets better too. 39, 37, 37, 41. Um, Siegemund, Zhang, Svitolina. Yeah. So then what that's kind of defined by is this like hold trend. So this is basically the change, the slope, if you will. So here you have like Ostapenko with a positive slope. There's like a handful of players that have a positive slope, which is not what it really looks like in the men's tour. So like Ostapenko, Vondrousova, Kalinskaya, Badosa, Kasatkina, Siniakova, and Kessler all get better against better competition. So some of it's relative though, right? Because Siniakova and Kasatkina don't hold well to begin with. So like getting better doesn't mean that they're really good at it now. It just means that like it they don't get any worse. So like their percentages are still gonna like pretty much be the same, slightly better, but they're not gonna like get that much worse. And that's kind of what will be reflected in the adjusted hold um, percentage at the end. And then who else? Yeah, Anna Samova, pretty much no change. So like across the board, it doesn't matter the opponent, she's gonna hold at basically the same rate. So like that's when or if they pull up the graphic out of the match and they're like, she holds at 71% of the time, she holds at 71% of the time, give or take. Um, and then we'll look at it the opposite way. So like again, like this is why it's bad to be Orango here. She, like she holds at the lowest rate to begin with, and she has the biggest change in a negative way. So like that's not good. Ivelisse, who I like, goes down, unfortunately, a bit as well. Um, Pavlyuchenkova goes down. Um, Kostyuk, Joint, like these are the ones that as the competition gets better, they hold less often. Um, yeah, a couple top big names, Zhang, Paolini, Keys. But it's less of an issue, right? If like your keys and you're holding at 74% of the time, and then now you're holding at 61%, like not great, but it's not as bad as you're holding at 62% and now you're holding at 45%. It's still better than most other people that are in this range. And then lastly, for this portion here, break percentages, or excuse me, I went to break trend. Um, Ostapenko, uh, Boysan, Pavlyuchenkova, Goff, Sabalenka, Siegemund. These are the ones that their break percentages go up as the opponent gets more difficult. Um, so like nice to see here that like Rybakina doesn't really have much change. She's breaking at give or take 30% of the time against anyone. Um, so that's kind of nice to know because she's the best server. So like you kind of have like some understanding of how she's gonna play regardless of her opponent. Um, then the opposite way, Raducanu here actually goes down. She breaks less as the opponent gets better. Not ideal. And then Arango still up high in this part of the list as well. Joint, Duskova, Kudermetova, yeah. Like even here, like Iga, this goes down, right? She goes from 43 elite, 41 elite, 34 elite. 31 is still better than like pretty much everybody. It's just because she's going from being at 43 that her break trend is negative, right? Like Iga is 15th against top 10 in terms of break percentage. That's still elite. That's still very, very good. So like just because her break trend was negative doesn't mean that like she stinks by any means. All right, and then what you'll see on the chart here is adjusted hold percentage and break percentage. So that's just taking in all this previous information into account and then um, adjusting it based like on all of this, right? So like you have all this data now and versus top 100 versus top 50 versus top 20 versus top 10 and all those changing data points. And then now you're adjusting it based on this data and who they played and what their percentages are to give you like a more accurate representation if everybody was on like the same playing field and you adjust for the opponent. So, I mean, it's pretty similar to what it is. It just in the beginning and some of these like sorting that you've seen throughout, but it's just trying to be more accurate. It's like Rybakina, Osaka, Sabalenka, Noskova, Badosa, Vondrousova, Alexandrova, Iga, Andreeva, Towson, Anisimova, um, are pretty high up at the top. And then as we go down, like you got Arango, Elise, My Joint, Jovic, Potapova, Buskova, Kasatkina. Um, yeah, this is where you don't want to be. So some of these people like Rango's like not. Just, unfortunately, Arango and Elise are holding less than 50% of their time against like the same playing field. And then just break percentage. Coco, Ostapenko, Sabalenka, Zhang, Siegemund, Andreeva, Svitolina, Iga, um, yeah, and Christian, Lee, Kudermetova, Mukova, Raducanu. Uh, Most of this stuff is easier to see in a chart view to kind of visualize it, and then which I'll get to in one sec. The last thing is just games won per 25. So it's really just looking at those percentages, right? So like um, if you were to play 100 service games, if you're Arena Sabalenka, you'd hold 73 times out of 100. If you were to play 100 return games against the average opponent, like Mystery Player X, you'd break 38.9, 39 times, whatever you want to call that. Um, But obviously, a tennis match isn't 200 games, 100 service, 100 return. It's, I think the average is like 24, 23 in a best of three. So like just for math purposes, I went with per 25, and this is the amount of games won that each person would win based on like your obviously holding, your serving and returning, to try and put that into more like math terms for what those percentages like mean. Uh, I think the biggest shocker is just Ostapenko, and I know she's inconsistent at times, but um, yeah, I think just I mean there's some promising data there. So I guess we'll see how that actually plays out in the 2026 season. But yeah, everyone else isn't overly surprising, right? Sabalenka, Bakina, Andreeva, Iga, Svitolina, Goff, Anisimova, Alexandrova, Andrusova, Pegula, Osaka, Badosa, Keys, like makes a lot of sense. And the flip side is just like Arango. Most of the same names when you reverse sort anyways, because of the way it's all adding up. And then so what that kind of all equals is this chart here where on the x-axis you have adjusted hold percentage and the y-axis you have the adjusted break percentage. So this shows basically you want to be far to the right where you're holding a lot and high up where you're breaking a lot. So like top right is where you want to be. I actually put this in like another screenshot. Hopefully you guys can kind of see it. Uh, okay. So just to kind of like orchestrate like grouping here and where everyone kind of fits in and what it means. So Rybakina is the farthest to the right. So like that stands out, right? Because that's your holding percentage. So like obviously clearly the best server. Nobody's really that close to her. And she breaks out a decent amount, but she's not like in the elite breaking area where she's not super high up. So I kind of just put her in her own category of like the best server, like on the tour. Um, so she's doing great over there. Sabalenka, I put as the best in the world because you just want to be right and up, and she's the most right and up player, like kind of here. I know she's not the highest up and she's not the most right, but overall, she's the most top right that you can be. Um, so that's where just where you want to be. Underneath that, in that like orange circle, we have very good all around players. So like they're basically similar to Sabalenka, right? Where they hold well above average and they break well above average. They're just not doing either one of them super elite. It's kind of hard to see the names, but you have Iga, Andreeva, Svitolina, Pegula, Anisimova, um, Alexandrova. Um, yeah, so extremely good players. Like that's kind of where you want to be in order to like take that next step and do something a little bit better and go more right or more up and get into that like best in the world. Like in the men's side, it's Alcaraz and Sinner that are even more right. They're basically if you were to like draw a line between like Sabalenka and like go up and then draw one from Goff and Ostapenko right, and they're just like clearly top right. Um, but anyways, the best returners you have on that like top middle, where you have Coco and Ostapenko, like they break way higher than everybody else, but they don't hold serve quite as much, so they're kind of in their own grouping. Um, and then kind of the opposite, you have the big servers in the bottom-ish, right? So these people clearly break a lot less than Coco and Ostapenko, but they hold serve like significantly more. So they're kind of in that big servers tier of Osaka, Noskova, Badosa, Tauson, Kanskaya, Fernandez, Mukova. Um, moving on though, you have the solid all around. That's just underneath the very good all around. So these are they do everything pretty well above average, but not elite. And that's kind of how they are right, kind of smack dab in the middle, where you have Keys and Boko, Kessler, and Samsonova, kind of Bencic too. Um, and then farther down, now you're starting to get to like kind of, again, this is top 50, so it doesn't mean like you're below average, but as you're getting farther away from where you want to be, like that, these people have like an average game. Like they're not really that great at anything. They're not that bad at anything either. Um, it's okay. Like you have Yastremska, Sinyakova, Schneider, Kennan, Mertens, Kruger. Like so you got to do something a little bit better here if you want to really compete for titles. Underneath them, you have the okay serve, bad return group, where they just are not breaking and their serves just okay. Like they're not completely to the left, but they're not to the right where you want to be either. Like Raducanu, Kudermetova, Christian, and Lee. Um, and then as we go up, we'll go up to the red group, the very good returners. Uh, so they're not as good as Coco and Ostapenko, and they're obviously like not in the very good all-around group, right? Because they don't hold very well. They're pretty far left on the x-axis, but they return just as well as that group, just as well as like Anisimova, Iga, Sabalenka, but they hold serve at like 10, 15% less. So here you have like Zhang, Kasatkina, Paolini, Navarro, um, Kostyuk, Cirstea, and yeah, so if they really want to start like competing for titles on a more consistent basis, and I know Paolini and Zhang do, but a lot of that, like they beat up a little bit more like on the lower ranked players, like the percentages change a bit more as they play top players. And I know Zhang was injured, so that might affect some of her sample. Um, and like Paolini's very good. Like she's been consistent the last couple of years. Um, so like what her being here doesn't mean that she's not a good tennis player. It just means that like when you level set everything, she's holding at a lower rate than a lot of the top players, and she's breaking at a pretty consistent rate compared to them. But the hold rate is what's the biggest kicker for her. And then the last group is like kind of the bottom left area. Um, just put no strains, right? You're not breaking at a high percentage and you're not holding at a high percentage. You're holding at like basically 50% and you're breaking at like 27%. So it's just you're not doing anything really better than anybody else on this chart. So it's gonna be tough to be successful and win a lot. Um, so yeah. Um, hope you guys found this interesting. I ramble a bit. But it's a lot of data and it's kind of cool and uh, hoping to try and see if this stuff works out and like actually uh, has like an impact on what happens, like match results maybe hopefully will line up with this. Uh, so I guess we'll stay tuned and see if that happens, but also looking forward to like creating some more charts and um, trying to bring a more advanced analytics angle. Not that this is super advanced, but um, yeah, just trying to use data more. I feel like there's not as much like data analysis in tennis as there are in like other sports like basketball or football. Um, so yeah, just trying to dive in, find some insights and stuff. So, but yeah, thank you.